He built a billion-dollar empire, but nothing prepared him to face the woman he abandoned, cradling his 3 identical daughters in a hospital hallway. The sterile scent of antiseptic hung in the air as Lucas Hartwell stepped into the hospital's marble-floored lobby. His polished shoes echoed with every step, a rhythmic reminder of the corporate empire he had built, powerful, untouchable, always in control. His assistant was 2 steps behind, murmuring details about the new medical acquisition deal. Lucas didn't need the briefing. He had read the files. Numbers were predictable. People were not. That truth struck him like a blow when, from the far end of the corridor, a familiar silhouette appeared. At first, it was just a figure. Blonde hair pulled into a messy bun, slender shoulders tense as she adjusted a baby carrier against her chest. A stroller stood beside her, and in it, 2 tiny bundles shifted under soft blankets. Lucas's stride faltered. Emma. Her name hit him before his heart could brace for the impact. She hadn't seen him yet. She was murmuring softly to the baby in her arms, her voice tender, the kind of voice that once lulled him out of sleepless nights, years ago. For a fleeting second, he thought it was an illusion, a ghost of his past surfacing in the least likely place. But no hallucination would come with 3 infants. He stood frozen, the hospital's background noise muting as his entire being fixated on the small scene ahead. The baby against her chest shifted, revealing a wisp of dark brown hair and, when it peeked up briefly, eyes that were painfully familiar. Blue. His blue. In the stroller, another set of matching baby blues blinked up, curious and unknowing. The air left his lungs. It was not possible. Or rather, it was too possible. As if sensing his stare, Emma turned her head. For a heartbeat, her expression didn't change. Then recognition dawned, followed swiftly by a stiffening of her jaw, her body pulling instinctively back as though she'd been slapped. She did not smile. She did not speak. She simply looked at him as if he was the last person in the world she wanted to see. Lucas found his feet moving towards her before his mind could process what the hell he was going to say. He wasn't ready for this. There had been no script prepared for this scene. Emma, his voice cracked, foreign to his own ears. She shifted the baby in her arms protectively, her posture screaming walls up defense. You don't get to say my name. Calm. Controlled. But her knuckles were white against the handle of the stroller. The babies, all 3 of them, had his eyes. The realization was inescapable, each second hammering the truth deeper into his gut. Are they? He couldn't finish. His mouth had gone dry. Emma's lips curled into a tight, humorless smile. What? Yours? That's what you're about to ask, right? She adjusted the blanket over the infant in her arms, not giving him the satisfaction of an answer. The way she held them all, it was as though she had built a fortress, with the babies at its heart, and Lucas standing outside, unworthy of entry. I didn't know, he whispered, as if that could possibly excuse anything. Emma's eyes flashed with something sharp, bitter. Of course you didn't. You didn't stay long enough to find out, Lucas. There it was. The truth, raw and unvarnished. He had left. A year ago, driven by his own cowardice, his own suffocating fear of attachment, of the chaos love could bring into his perfectly controlled world. Emma, we need to talk. He stepped closer, ignoring the stares of passing nurses, the confusion of his assistant who stood awkwardly in the background, pretending not to hear what was rapidly turning into a personal crisis. No, Lucas. You need to leave. Her voice was cold now, but the faint tremble betrayed her. These girls have no idea who you are. And I intend to keep it that way. It was a gunshot to the chest. He couldn't breathe. He didn't deserve to. The infants cooed softly, one of them catching Lucas's gaze with innocent curiosity. It was a moment that split his world into before and after. He had run from responsibility, from the terrifying possibility of being vulnerable, and in doing so, he had missed the most important moments of his life. Moments that couldn't be rewound. "I'm not leaving," Lucas said, quieter now, as though understanding for the first time that words would not be his weapon here. Not charm, not influence, not money. He would have to fight for this. And he would start by standing his ground, even when the earth felt like it was crumbling beneath him. Emma's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't argue. She simply turned, adjusting the stroller, her back a clear dismissal. Yet as she walked away, Lucas saw it, the slightest hesitation in her step. The war between her heart and her pain. Lucas Hartwell, master of boardrooms, conqueror of markets, had just met his greatest reckoning, and she walked away pushing a stroller with 3 tiny versions of him, who didn't even know he existed. He wouldn't let it end here. Lucas had never felt this powerless in his life. No hostile takeover, no boardroom betrayal, no scandal could compare to the hollow ache left by Emma's retreating figure. He should have chased after her, but what would he have said? That he was sorry? Words had always been his weapon, but now they felt meaningless, hollow against the weight of what he had done. He had abandoned her. Worse, he had abandoned them, his daughters, without even knowing they existed. The hospital corridor felt suffocating as he stood there, unable to move, watching as she disappeared around the corner. His assistant muttered something about the contract meeting, but Lucas waved him off. Nothing else mattered now. Contracts could be renegotiated. Lives couldn't. He found Emma hours later. The nurse at the reception, after recognizing his last name and the tension in his eyes, reluctantly pointed him towards the pediatric wing. He didn't know what he expected, but certainly not the image that greeted him when he reached the glass doors of a small private room. Emma sat on a narrow hospital couch, cradling one of the babies against her chest. The other 2 lay curled up beside her, each tucked under her arms as though she was physically holding her world together. Her head was bowed, strands of her blonde hair falling like a curtain, but Lucas could see the exhaustion etched into every line of her face. She looked up as he knocked lightly on the glass. There was no welcome in her eyes. Only steel. He entered slowly, deliberately keeping his voice low, as if any sudden movement could shatter the fragile walls she had built around herself. "Emma, I'm not here to fight. I just need to understand. Please." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked down at the sleeping infant in her arms, tracing her tiny cheek with a trembling finger. Lucas's heart ached. He had missed so much. First smiles. First cries. First everything. "I don't owe you anything, Lucas," she said at last, her voice hoarse from the weight of unshed tears. "You made your choice a long time ago." He sat down across from her, not daring to get closer. "No, Emma. I made a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life." His hands curled into fists on his knees. I thought I was doing the right thing back then. I thought I wasn't good enough for you." Emma let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "You didn't even give me the chance to decide that for myself. You left, Lucas. You left without a word. Do you even remember what day it was?" He did. August 12th. The day of the company's biggest merger. The day his mother had cornered him, feeding him lies about how Emma wasn't wife material, how she would drag him down, how she was after his money. He had believed it. Or maybe he had wanted to believe it, because it was easier than facing how deeply she had gotten under his skin. "I was going to tell you that day," Emma whispered, not looking at him. "About the pregnancy. I waited for you. I called. You never answered." She took a shaky breath. "And when your assistant told me you'd flown to Tokyo, I understood everything. You had no place for me in your life. Or for them. Lucas closed his eyes. The truth of his own cowardice was a blade twisting deeper. He had fled, not because of the merger, not because of his mother, but because he had been terrified. Emma had seen parts of him that no one else dared to approach. She had seen the boy who craved affection beneath the armor of success. He had run from that, too afraid to be vulnerable. I didn't know about them, Emma. You have to believe me. If I had known. His voice broke, and he couldn't finish. What right did he have to even say that? Emma looked at him now, truly looked, and what he saw wasn't just anger, it was pain. Raw, deep, and all-consuming. What would you have done, Lucas? Married me out of guilt? Sent money? You weren't ready to be a father. You weren't even ready to be honest with yourself. The baby stirred, as if sensing the storm hanging in the air. Emma immediately shifted her focus, soothing them with soft words, her entire being centered around their fragile lives. Lucas watched, feeling like an outsider in a story he should have been a part of. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said quietly. But I'm not going to walk away this time. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to be in their lives. I want to be a father. I'll start from nothing if I have to. Emma didn't respond right away. She rocked the baby in her arms, eyes distant. You don't get to claim them just because you're ready now, Lucas. They're not an acquisition. They're not a project to fix. I know, he said simply. But I can't pretend they don't exist. I can't pretend you don't exist. I don't want to. The silence that followed was heavy, but not as suffocating as before. Emma's defenses were still up, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her gaze now, a crack in the wall she had built so carefully. Lucas stood up slowly, not wanting to push her. I'll leave, if you want me to. But I'll be back tomorrow. And the day after. And every day after that, until you believe me. As he reached the door, Emma's voice stopped him. Lucas. He turned, heart pounding. They're 4 months old. Their names are Carla, Lily, and Sophia. For a moment, he couldn't speak. His throat tightened, emotions clawing up his chest. He had missed 4 months, but he wouldn't miss another day. Thank you, he managed to say, knowing how much it had cost her to give him even that. He left the room, but this time, it wasn't a retreat. It was a beginning. Lucas returned the next morning earlier than any meeting had ever demanded of him. He wasn't used to feeling like a trespasser, but as he walked through the quiet hospital halls with a paper cup of coffee in hand, every step felt tentative, as if at any moment someone would tell him to leave. Yet, nothing could have prepared him for the sight that awaited him when he gently knocked and cracked open the door to Emma's room. She was standing by the window, cradling Carla in her arms, her silhouette bathed in the soft morning light. The other 2 girls were still asleep in the bassinets beside the couch. Emma didn't turn when he entered, but he saw the faintest tension in her shoulders. She knew he was there. I brought coffee, he said, holding it out like an awkward peace offering. She didn't respond. The silence stretched, heavy, but not suffocating this time. She was giving him a chance. That was enough for now. Lucas set the coffee on the table and sat down in the chair furthest from her, careful not to crowd her space. He had spent the entire night rehearsing words, drafting apologies, and now that he was here, all of them seemed small, insignificant against the weight of what stood between them. Emma, I need you to tell me everything. Please, he said quietly, eyes fixed on the tiny bundle in her arms. Carla's little hand was wrapped around Emma's finger, holding on with the quiet fierceness of a child who knew her entire world was right there. Emma's voice was flat when she finally spoke, her gaze still turned to the window. After you left, I didn't know what to do. I was angry, Lucas. I was so angry at you, at myself, at everything. But mostly, I was terrified. She shifted Carla gently and took a slow breath. I found out I was pregnant a week after you flew to Tokyo. I tried to call. You never picked up. Lucas's jaw tensed, but he said nothing. He deserved this. I thought about telling you. God, I wanted to. But then your mother called me. The bitterness in her voice sharpened. She made it very clear that you were moving on, and that any attempt to reach you would only humiliate me further. She told me you were seeing someone else, that you had no intention of settling down with someone like me. Lucas felt his stomach twist. His mother had always been cold, but this was cruelty in its purest form. I didn't know, he said, hating how weak it sounded. Emma finally turned to face him. Her eyes were tired, but they were no longer full of anger. Instead, there was something deeper, something fragile. That's the problem, Lucas. You never knew. You never asked. She sat down, still holding Carla, and Lucas saw the weight of the past year settle around her like a second skin. I didn't want your money. I didn't want a charity marriage. I wanted you. And when you left, I had to build a life without you. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, feeling the burn of her words deep in his chest. Emma, I can't change what I did. But I can change everything from this moment on. I want to be in their lives. I want to be in yours, if you'll let me. He paused, searching her face. I'm not asking for forgiveness today. I'm asking for a chance to earn it. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the soft breathing of the sleeping twins. Then, Emma shifted, placing Carla gently into her bassinet. She looked smaller without the child in her arms, more vulnerable, and Lucas realized how much she had been carrying alone. You don't know how to be a father, Lucas, she said softly, almost as if testing him. No, he admitted, the honesty cutting him as much as it freed him. But I want to learn. I'll do whatever it takes. He stood, taking a slow step toward her. I've been a CEO, a businessman, a cold-hearted bastard who thought success would fill the empty spaces inside me. But none of it mattered the second I saw you in that hallway. Emma's eyes glistened, but no tears fell. She had cried enough. You can't fix this with grand gestures. I don't want to fix it, Lucas said, his voice firmer now. I want to build it. Brick by brick, if I have to. I'll be here, Emma. Every day. I'll hold them when they cry. I'll get up at 3 in the morning. I'll sit in this hospital until you believe I'm not going to leave again. She studied him, searching for the cracks, the weaknesses. But Lucas stood his ground. He didn't flinch, didn't try to fill the silence with promises he wasn't ready to keep. For once, he was present. Entirely. After what felt like an eternity, Emma exhaled slowly. You can stay, she said, and though the words were small, they carried the weight of a door cracking open. Lucas felt his chest loosen, the air filling his lungs as if for the first time in months. He stepped closer, slowly, and when she didn't recoil, he knelt beside the bassinets, gazing at the tiny faces of his daughters. He traced the edge of Lily's tiny hand with a fingertip, overwhelmed by how real, how fragile, and how utterly perfect she was. They're perfect, Emma, he whispered. They deserve someone who won't run at the first sign of fear, she replied, and it wasn't a warning, it was a plea. Lucas looked up at her. I'm done running. And for the first time since their encounter, Emma's lips softened, not a smile, not yet, but something close. It was a start. Lucas knew this was only the beginning of a long and brutal road, but for the first time, he welcomed the struggle. Because this time, the reward wasn't a company or a title. It was family. It was love. and he wouldn't lose it again. The days began to blur into each other as Lucas kept his silent promise. Every morning, he arrived at the hospital before sunrise, coffee in hand, and stayed until the nurses dimmed the lights for the evening rounds. He didn't press Emma with grand speeches anymore. He didn't try to demand his place. Instead, he showed up and did what needed to be done, holding the babies when they fussed, fetching extra blankets when Emma looked cold, pacing the room for hours with Lily in his arms when her tiny lungs found the strength to scream for no reason at all. Slowly, the invisible wall between him and Emma began to thin, though it never disappeared. On the 5th day, while Lucas was quietly rocking Sophia to sleep, Emma sat on the edge of the couch, her posture tense as if she were weighing a decision. The hospital was unusually quiet, the usual shuffle of nurses replaced by a hush that made the air feel heavier. Lucas glanced at Emma, sensing the shift, but said nothing. He had learned by now that her truths came in their own time. She broke the silence with a question he wasn't prepared for. "Do you know what your mother did after you left?" Lucas's grip on Sophia tightened instinctively, though his expression remained composed. "No. But I have a feeling I'm about to find out." Emma's lips twitched, not with humor, but with something bitter and sharp. "A week after you disappeared, I got a visit. Not a call. A personal visit, in my apartment. Your mother, dressed in her perfect tailored suit, standing in my doorway as if she had every right to walk into my life." Emma's hands fidgeted with the hem of her sweater, her eyes distant. "She offered me a check. Blank. Told me to name my price to quietly vanish. She made it clear that I was an embarrassment, a complication you didn't need." Lucas felt his blood run cold. He had always known his mother was ruthless in business, but this was something else. This was personal. "She never told me," he said, though the words sounded weak even to his own ears. Of course she hadn't. His mother's manipulations were always cloaked in the illusion of protecting him. "I tore the check in half," Emma continued, her voice trembling now, but she pressed on. "She looked at me like I was a child throwing a tantrum. And then she said the most disgusting thing I've ever heard. She said I should be grateful she was giving me a chance to preserve my dignity before you did it publicly." Lucas wanted to punch something, anything, but he knew that rage wouldn't fix what had already been broken. His jaw clenched, but his voice remained controlled. "I swear to you, Emma, I had no idea she went that far." Emma's gaze softened, but only slightly. "You believed her lies, though. You left without asking me anything." "I know," Lucas admitted, his throat tightening. "She's controlled every decision in my life for as long as I can remember. She played me, and I let her. But this is where it ends." Emma looked skeptical. "You've said that before. Every time she interfered, you made excuses. What's different now?" Lucas stood, carefully placing the now sleeping Sophia back into her bassinet. He turned to Emma, and his voice was steadier than it had been in days. "Because now she's not just trying to control me, she's hurt you. She's hurt my daughters. And I'm done being her puppet." He paused, meeting Emma's gaze fully. "You and the girls are my family now. Not her. I should have realized that a long time ago, but I was a coward." Emma seemed to study him, as if searching for the cracks where old habits might still hide. When she didn't immediately respond, Lucas added, "I know this is just words, Emma. That's why I've already started changing things." Her brows knit together in suspicion. "What do you mean?" Lucas took a breath. "I've called a board meeting. I'm pushing for a full audit of the family trust and corporate governance. I'm exposing everything she's done behind closed doors, the manipulations, the bribery, all of it. I don't care what it costs me." Emma's expression shifted from surprise to something far more guarded. "You're willing to destroy your empire for this?" Lucas shook his head slowly. No, Emma. I'm willing to rebuild it. But this time, on my terms. On our terms. His eyes softened. I want to create a life where our daughters will never have to grow up feeling like pawns on someone else's chessboard. For a long moment, Emma was silent, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, though her posture remained rigid. She had heard promises before. But this time, Lucas wasn't promising her a perfect world. He was offering her a fight. I don't want your battles to fall on their shoulders, Lucas, she whispered, looking over at the 3 bassinets lined up like fragile dominoes. I don't want them growing up in the shadow of a war between you and your family. They won't, Lucas said firmly. Because I won't let them. I'm not fighting to hurt anyone. I'm fighting to free myself. To be worthy of being their father. To be worthy of you. Emma let out a shaky breath, and for the first time, her rigid posture eased. She didn't speak, but Lucas saw it, the smallest nod, the quietest acceptance. She wasn't ready to give him her trust, not yet, but she was ready to let him try. The war with his mother would be brutal. The boardroom would turn into a battlefield. He would lose allies. He might even lose everything he had built. But as Lucas sat back down, watching his daughters sleep, he understood that losing everything was a small price to pay for finally being free. For the first time in his life, Lucas Hartwell was ready to be a son no longer and a father above all else. The storm Lucas had set in motion with the board meeting was not just a corporate upheaval. It was a declaration of war against everything that had shaped his life until now. As the days blurred into restless nights, Lucas juggled the suffocating pressure of corporate politics with the fragile, unpredictable world inside Emma's hospital room. The board members, most of whom owed their loyalties to his mother, were already circling like vultures, dissecting his every move, watching for cracks. Lucas had never felt so exposed. But something had shifted inside him. The power games that once thrilled him now felt hollow. Sitting in that cold boardroom under fluorescent lights, facing men who had measured his worth in percentages and quarterly reports, Lucas found his mind wandering back to the hospital. To the soft coos of his daughters. To Emma's wary, exhausted smile. For the first time, he didn't care if the empire he had built crumbled beneath him, as long as the foundation he was building with them remained intact. When he wasn't being ambushed by board memos or legal threats disguised as concerns, Lucas was at the hospital. He wasn't good at the practical parts yet. Changing diapers was a battlefield he approached with the same grim determination he once reserved for closing billion-dollar deals. The first time he'd tried, the disaster was spectacular. Sophia had squirmed out of his grip, and in his clumsy attempt to regain control, he'd managed to knock over a bottle of formula, drench his shirt, and elicit a sharp, involuntary laugh from Emma. It was the first time in weeks he had seen a genuine, unguarded smile on her face. That single moment felt more victorious than any stock market triumph. Emma had stopped pushing him away physically, though emotionally, she still kept her defenses high. But her eyes had begun to soften when he entered the room. There was a shift in her posture when he took Carla into his arms without hesitation, even if his movements were awkward. He was earning his place not with words, but with consistency. One evening, as the city outside glimmered under a blanket of cold rain, Lucas sat with Emma in the dim light of the hospital room. The twins were asleep, and Carla was nestled against his chest, her tiny breath steady, her hand clutching his shirt like a silent claim. "I never imagined you like this," Emma said, her voice low but without malice. Lucas looked at her, unsure if it was a compliment or an accusation. "Clumsy and sleep-deprived?" he asked, managing a tired smile. "No," she replied, shaking her head. "Here. Present. You were always somewhere else, even when we were together. Always chasing the next deal, the next success." She leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I didn't think you'd ever know how to be still." Lucas ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of that truth settle. I didn't know how. No one ever taught me that standing still could mean anything other than failure. My whole life, it was always about the next win. My mother made sure of that. Emma watched him for a moment, her gaze unreadable. You were raised to believe love was conditional, she said. You had to earn it, prove you deserved it. That's not how family works, Lucas. I'm starting to understand that, he admitted, his gaze drifting down to Carla, who had fallen into a deeper sleep, trusting and unaware of the chaos her father was trying to mend. The following days were a whirlwind. His mother, having caught wind of his intentions, launched a media offensive. Articles surfaced questioning Lucas's stability and hinting at internal conflicts that threatened the company's future. Anonymous leaks whispered of him being manipulated by a former employee with a questionable past, a thinly veiled attack on Emma. Lucas anticipated the ambush. What he didn't expect was Emma's reaction when she saw the headlines. She confronted him the moment he entered the hospital room. The babies were asleep, but Emma's fury was sharp and immediate. Is this your idea of fixing things, Lucas? She snapped, thrusting her phone towards him. The headline read, Hartwell Empire at Risk, CEO's Reckless Personal Life Raises Questions. He took the phone, his jaw tightening. No, Emma. This is my mother's idea of maintaining control. Emma's arms were crossed, her body coiled like a spring. And what? You're going to fight her with press releases? Do you think this is a game of who spins the better narrative? Lucas's voice dropped, the weight of exhaustion and determination bleeding into every word. No, Emma. I'm going to fight her by taking away the one thing she fears losing most, her power. I'm exposing everything. The shady deals, the shell companies she's been hiding assets in, the board members she's been bribing. Emma's breath hitched, her anger tempered by the sheer enormity of what he was saying. You're willing to burn it all down. If that's what it takes to build something real, he said. His eyes never left hers. I've already started liquidating my personal shares. I'm redirecting the capital into a new venture, something that matters. What kind of venture? She asked, the suspicion still in her voice, but curiosity softening her tone. A network of community clinics. For single mothers. For families who get left behind in the corporate world's endless chase for profits. He paused, his next words careful, vulnerable. It's something I would have never thought of if I hadn't seen you here, fighting alone with 3 daughters you should have never had to raise without support. Emma was quiet, her expression unreadable, but the tension in her shoulders eased. Lucas didn't expect gratitude. He didn't want it. This wasn't about being a savior. This was about rewriting the narrative of his own life. In the coming days, the storm intensified. Lucas faced relentless board meetings, legal threats, and media slander. But every night, he returned to the hospital, arms open, ready for another sleepless night of bottle feedings and diaper changes. He stopped flinching at the cries, stopped panicking when formula ended up more on him than in the babies' mouths. His suits grew more wrinkled, his hair more unruly, but with every mistake, every small victory, he chipped away at the walls Emma had built. One night, after a particularly brutal day where he had been publicly called unfit to lead by a family ally, Lucas collapsed onto the couch in the hospital room, utterly spent. Emma, who had been silently folding tiny onesies, looked over at him. You're not going to win this easily, you know, she said, her tone softer now, less confrontational. Lucas chuckled wearily, covering his eyes with his forearm. I don't need easy, Emma. I just need worth it. She didn't reply, but he heard her move closer. Felt the cushion dip as she sat beside him. It wasn't an invitation to victory. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was proximity. For now, that was everything. As Lucas sat beside her in the dim glow of the hospital lamp, listening to the rhythmic breathing of his daughters, he realized that for the first time in his life, he wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting not to lose the only thing that had ever mattered. And he wasn't afraid anymore. He would battle in boardrooms, in headlines, in the suffocating weight of his own guilt. But here, in this small hospital room, surrounded by the chaos of bottles, blankets, and the quiet pulse of new life, Lucas Hartwell had found his reason to stay standing. The war wasn't over. But for the first time, he wasn't fighting alone. The boardroom was silent as Lucas entered, his steps echoing across the polished marble floor. Every eye in the room tracked his movements, their faces a blend of skepticism, arrogance, and thinly veiled contempt. These men and women had once been allies, or so he thought, but today, Lucas could see them for what they truly were, guardians of a legacy built on control, manipulation, and fear. They weren't here for the company's future. They were here to protect the iron grip his mother had enforced for decades. At the head of the table, Eleanor Hartwell sat poised, her expression as unreadable as a marble statue. Her presence had always commanded the room, but today, Lucas wasn't a boy desperate for her approval. Today, he had walked into this room to dismantle the illusion she had crafted around their empire. "Lucas, I see you're finally honoring us with your presence," Eleanor said, her tone clipped, designed to draw out the old reflexive guilt. Lucas took his seat opposite her, meeting her gaze with a calmness he had never known in her presence before. "I'm here because this meeting is long overdue." The murmurs rippled through the room. Eleanor folded her hands, perfectly composed. "We're here to address your recent distractions. Personal scandals, reckless divestments, and the concerning rumors of your association with individuals who may tarnish this company's reputation." Lucas leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled together. "You mean Emma Blake? The mother of my daughters?" The way the words filled the room left no room for subtlety. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. His mother's jaw tightened, but her expression remained icily polite. "Lucas, the board is concerned about your judgment. This company cannot afford sentimentality." Lucas smiled, but it wasn't pleasant. "You're right. Which is why I've commissioned a full forensic audit of the family's financial activities over the past 10 years. The room erupted into a frenzy of voices. He let them speak, let their panic fill the space. Eleanor's voice sliced through the noise. "You're making a fool of yourself. You're attacking your own legacy." Lucas's voice was steady, calm, but each word landed like a hammer. "No, Mother. I'm dismantling the rot you've allowed to fester beneath the surface. The shell companies. The off-the-book payouts. The board votes you've bought." He pulled out a dossier and slid it across the table. "Everything is in here. And before you threaten me, copies have already been sent to regulatory agencies." Eleanor's facade cracked, just for a moment. A flicker of fury in her eyes. But Lucas wasn't finished. "The age of power through fear is over. I'm resigning as CEO, effective immediately." The room went dead silent. Lucas stood, buttoning his jacket with a slow, deliberate motion. "I'm selling my remaining shares. The proceeds will fund a network of family wellness clinics. Hartwell Industries can continue its race for profit without me. I'm done." Eleanor's voice, low and venomous, cut through the shock. "You'll regret this, Lucas. You're nothing without this company." Lucas met her gaze, but this time there was no hatred, only clarity. "You're wrong. I was nothing because of this company." And with that, he walked out, leaving the board scrambling in chaos behind him. Outside, the air tasted different. Cleaner. Every step away from that building felt like shedding a weight that had been welded to his soul for years. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but for once, it wasn't a board member demanding his attention. It was Emma. "Where are you?" she asked, her voice soft but uncertain. "On my way to you," Lucas said, and he meant every word. When he arrived at the hospital, the atmosphere had shifted. Emma wasn't in her usual guarded stance. She stood by the window, watching the rain, but this time, when he entered, she turned to him with an expression that wasn't hostility or suspicion, it was curiosity. "You did it," she said, not as a question, but as a quiet realization. Lucas nodded, stepping closer. "I walked away from it all. The company. My shares. The family name." Emma's eyes searched his face, as if trying to decipher what this decision had cost him. "And what are you now, Lucas Hartwell, without the empire?" He smiled, not with arrogance but with something softer, more genuine. "I'm a father. That's more than I've ever been before." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she gestured toward the bassinets where Carla, Lily, and Sophia were sleeping. "You realize they don't care about empires. They'll care if you're there when they wake up crying." "I'll be there," he said, without hesitation. "Every time." The days that followed weren't cinematic. There were no press conferences, no triumphant declarations of his new path. There was just Lucas, learning how to function on 3 hours of sleep, fumbling through feedings, and getting spit up on his last clean shirt. He traded meetings with shareholders for middle-of-the-night pacing with a fussy Lily. He learned that a successful diaper change felt more rewarding than closing a billion-dollar deal. Emma watched him, her walls slowly crumbling as Lucas proved himself not with promises, but with presence. He never left the hospital unless she sent him home to rest, though more often than not, he ended up curled in a chair beside the bassinets, half asleep but always alert. They fell into a rhythm, not perfect, not seamless, but real. One night, Emma found him asleep on the floor, his hand resting lightly on Carla's bassinet. She sat beside him, tucking a blanket over his shoulders, and for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life where Lucas didn't leave. A life where the man in front of her wasn't just a visitor passing through, but a constant. "You're really staying," she said softly. Lucas stirred, blinking up at her. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, she admitted, "I'm scared, Lucas." He sat up, facing her with a gentleness she wasn't used to. "So am I. But I think that's okay." The next morning, the hospital cleared Emma and the babies for discharge. Lucas handled every detail, car seats, paperwork, logistics, without complaint. His assistant, the same one who once coordinated global mergers, was now tasked with assembling bassinets and sterilizing bottles in Lucas's penthouse, which had been transformed from a sterile bachelor's fortress into a chaotic, cozy nursery. The first night at home was a disaster in every possible way. Nothing went according to plan. Feedings overlapped, diapers exploded, and Lucas discovered that his designer couch was not, in fact, spill-proof. Yet, amid the chaos, something remarkable happened. Emma laughed. Not a bitter, forced laugh, but a genuine, unrestrained burst of laughter as Lucas stood in the middle of the living room, covered in formula, holding 2 squirming babies while the third wailed from her crib. It wasn't perfect. But it was theirs. And for Lucas Hartwell, that was more than enough. The empire had fallen. But a family had risen in its place. And for the first time in his life, Lucas understood that this, the sleepless nights, the mess, the vulnerability, this was what it meant to win. The days at home blurred into a haze of sleepless nights and chaotic mornings, a relentless cycle of feeding, changing, and soothing that left no room for anything else. Lucas had thought he understood exhaustion. He had pulled all-nighters negotiating billion-dollar deals, survived 36-hour flights across continents, endured back-to-back meetings with no sleep and a smile plastered on his face. But this was different. This was a kind of bone-deep fatigue that didn't care about business acumen or mental endurance. It was humbling in a way that no corporate failure had ever been. Emma tried to maintain her strength, but it was clear she was unraveling. She moved through the days like a ghost, her once bright eyes dulled by exhaustion, her skin pale beneath the soft glow of the nursery nightlight. She refused to rest, insisted on being the one to wake up for every feeding, every whimper, as if afraid that letting go for a moment would mean losing control. Lucas watched her closely, seeing the cracks widen with each sleepless night, and it terrified him. One evening, after another relentless cycle of feeding all three girls, Lucas found Emma standing in the kitchen, her hands braced against the counter, her body trembling. She didn't hear him enter at first, and when she did, she straightened quickly, forcing a smile that fooled neither of them. "Emma," he said quietly, approaching her as if she might shatter if he got too close too quickly. "You need to rest." "I'm fine," she lied, her voice hoarse, her body betraying her with its unsteady sway. "You're not," Lucas countered, gently reaching out to steady her by the shoulders. She was frighteningly light beneath his hands. "You can't keep pouring from an empty cup, Emma." Her eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. "I can't afford to fall apart, Lucas. Not now. Not when they need me." Lucas pulled her into his arms, holding her as tightly as he dared. "Then let me be the one to hold things together for a while." That night, Emma finally let go. She allowed herself to sink into the bed, too exhausted to argue, while Lucas took over completely. Alone in the nursery, he faced the full brunt of the chaos without her as a shield. It was brutal. Carla refused to sleep, Lily was fussy and demanded to be held, and Sophia decided that night was perfect for a 2-hour crying marathon. Lucas paced the floor with a baby in each arm, bouncing gently, whispering whatever words came to mind, songs he didn't know he remembered, anything to soothe them. His muscles ached, his mind swam with fatigue, but he didn't stop. Hours passed, and the silence that eventually settled over the nursery felt like a victory more profound than any he had achieved in a boardroom. Lucas stood in the middle of the room, holding Sophia against his chest, her tiny breath warm against his skin, and for the first time, he felt it, peace. Emma found him there in the early hours of the morning. She had awakened to an unfamiliar quiet and, with a mix of anxiety and disbelief, had gone to check on them. What she found stopped her in the doorway. Lucas stood barefoot, his hair a mess, his shirt stained and wrinkled, but there was a serenity in his expression as he rocked Sophia gently, unaware that Emma was watching him. He noticed her after a moment, offering her a tired smile. "You should go back to sleep. We've got this under control now." Emma didn't respond right away. Instead, she leaned against the doorframe, studying him, truly seeing him for the first time not as the man who had once left her, but as the man who had stayed. Through the exhaustion, through the mess, through the brutal, thankless hours, Lucas had stayed. "You're terrible at this," she murmured, though her tone was soft, almost teasing. "I know," Lucas grinned, glancing down at the sleeping baby in his arms. "But I'm getting better. Trial by fire." Emma stepped into the room, her eyes never leaving his. "You really meant it, didn't you? All of it?" "I did," he said simply, because there was no need for grand declarations now. His actions had spoken for him. She crossed the room, and for the first time since the hospital, she reached for him, not out of necessity, not because she was falling apart, but because she wanted to. Her arms slid around his waist, careful not to disturb Sophia, and she pressed her cheek against his shoulder. "I'm scared, Lucas," she admitted, her voice muffled against his shirt. "I've been so scared to believe you'd stay. That if I let myself trust you, I'd end up broken again." Lucas rested his chin against her hair, holding her and Sophia as if anchoring them all in place. "I can't undo the past, Emma. But I can be here now. I can show you, every day, that I'm not going anywhere." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in the kind of silence that heals rather than hurts. For Emma, it was the first moment of rest that wasn't clouded by fear. For Lucas, it was the clearest proof that this raw, imperfect life, was more meaningful than anything his past had offered. In the weeks that followed, things didn't become easier, but they became theirs. Lucas made mistakes, plenty of them, but he was relentless in his effort to be better. Emma learned to let him share the load, to trust that he wasn't a temporary presence. They became a team, not flawless, not seamless, but real. One rainy afternoon, Emma found Lucas asleep on the floor of the nursery, his hand resting inside one of the bassinets where Carla had curled her tiny fist around his finger. The sight was so profoundly simple, so achingly intimate, that something inside Emma finally gave way. The walls she had built, the defenses she had lived behind for a year, crumbled quietly, without ceremony. She knelt beside him, gently brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "I believe you, Lucas," she whispered, even though he was too deep in sleep to hear her. But it didn't matter. She knew now that he would stay. And that was enough. The sun poured through the tall glass windows of the newly opened Hartwell Family Wellness Center, casting warm light onto the crowd gathered inside. There were no flashing cameras, no reporters, no grand speeches written by corporate advisors. This wasn't the kind of opening Lucas Hartwell's name used to command. It was quieter, more intimate. The people filling the room weren't shareholders or board members. They were mothers with toddlers clinging to their legs, fathers holding infants, young families who had once been left behind by the systems Lucas had spent his career feeding. Lucas stood near the entrance, his hands shoved into his pockets, watching as volunteers guided families through the newly furnished spaces, playrooms, counseling offices, medical exam rooms designed not with sterile corporate efficiency, but with warmth and empathy. Every detail had been chosen with care, every color and piece of furniture intended to make people feel safe, not scrutinized. Beside him, Emma was holding Sophia, while Carla and Lily sat in a double stroller, their wide blue eyes tracking every new sound and movement. Emma had insisted on dressing them in matching soft blue dresses for the occasion, though their tiny brown curls refused to stay neat, a rebellion that made Lucas grin every time he looked at them. "You're nervous," Emma said, not as a question but as a quiet observation. Lucas smiled, though his fingers curled slightly in his pockets. "A little. I'm used to cutting ribbons for things that don't actually matter to anyone." Emma shifted Sophia on her hip, her eyes soft but filled with the same blunt honesty that had always disarmed him. "This matters. You built something real this time." Lucas looked at her, the woman who had once stood as a silent accusation in every room he walked into, now standing beside him not as a symbol of his failures, but as a partner in something far greater than either of them had imagined. The journey hadn't been clean or graceful, but standing here, amidst the echoes of children's laughter and the hum of hopeful conversations, it was clear that the struggle had been worth it. When the time came for him to speak, Lucas didn't step onto a stage. Instead, he simply stood among the families, his daughters watching him with innocent curiosity. His voice didn't need to command attention. It simply needed to reach the people who mattered. "I used to think success was measured in numbers," he began, his tone steady but without the cold polish of corporate rehearsals. "I spent years chasing targets, profits, prestige. But in doing so, I forgot the most important measure of all, impact. Real, human impact." The room quieted, and Lucas saw Emma's eyes glisten with something that wasn't just pride, it was understanding. "This center isn't a gift from me," Lucas continued. "It's an apology. It's a commitment. To my family. To all the families who have been made to feel invisible by people like the man I used to be. From this day on, we build differently." He didn't say more. There was no need. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous. It was genuine, a ripple of gratitude from people who had long stopped believing anyone would stand up for them. After the informal ceremony, Lucas found himself kneeling beside a young mother who was struggling with a fussy toddler. Without hesitation, he offered his hand, making a funny face that, to his own surprise, drew a giggle from the child. Emma watched from a distance, holding their daughters, her heart tightening in her chest, not with fear, but with a profound, quiet joy. Later that evening, after the center had emptied and the building hummed with the soft quiet of a day well spent, Lucas and Emma stood in what would soon be the counseling room. The sun was setting, casting gold over the freshly painted walls. Their daughters, exhausted from the day's excitement, were asleep in their stroller. Emma reached out, lacing her fingers with Lucas's, an action so natural now it no longer felt like a fragile offering. "You did it," she said softly. Lucas turned to her, his expression open, vulnerable in a way he had once feared. "No, we did it. I wouldn't have survived this past year without you." Emma smiled, the kind of smile that once had seemed unreachable, and now felt like home. "You did more than survive, Lucas. You became." In that quiet, golden-lit room, Lucas Hartwell understood that he had spent his entire life building empires to impress people who never truly mattered. But here, surrounded by the echoes of children's laughter and the soft breath of his daughters, he had finally built something that did. On the ride home, Emma sat beside him in the back seat, her head resting lightly on his shoulder, their 3 daughters sleeping soundly between them. It was not a perfect picture. It was messy, unpredictable, and entirely unpolished. But it was theirs. And that made it perfect in a way Lucas had never known before. As the city lights flickered past the windows, Lucas pressed a kiss to Emma's hair, whispering a promise that no longer needed grand gestures or dramatic declarations. He had learned that true promises are kept not in words, but in the quiet moments, the sleepless nights, the small, relentless acts of showing up. He was home. Finally.
Billionaire tech CEO hires girl on contract for triplets, finds out she's a virgin, and falls in love. He didn't want a wife. He didn't want love. He just wanted an heir. So, he hired a young woman to bear him children. But what he didn't expect was her innocence. And what he never planned was falling in love. When the man who pays you to bear his children suddenly cradles you like you're his world, how can you still believe this was only about business? She was a virgin. He was a billionaire tech giant. He built machines, not relationships. But now, he can't build a future without her. Now let me ask you, do you believe love can grow from a contract? And more importantly, could you trust someone who offered you the world, but not their heart? Comment your thoughts below. Have you ever loved someone you weren't supposed to? Let's talk about it in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if this story already has your heart racing. Now let's begin. Lily Hart didn't belong in that building. At least that's what her trembling hands kept trying to convince her. Knight Innovations towered above downtown like a monument to impossible success. Sleek, sharp-edged, and unforgiving. Just like the man who built it. And here she was, a small-town waitress in her second-hand shoes, sitting in the reception area that shimmered with chrome and glass. Her purse was old and fraying. Her nails, short and bare. Her nerves, threadbare. But her reason for being there was everything. Her father's kidneys were failing. His last hope, a procedure far beyond anything their insurance would touch. Lily had tried everything, crowdfunding, double shifts, loans she'd never pay back. And then she saw the ad. Private contract, confidential arrangement, life-changing compensation, no experience required. It sounded outrageous, like the kind of thing you forward to friends as a joke. But she'd clicked. She'd applied. And now she was here. The assistant, cold and polished, opened the mahogany door and gave a nod. "Mr. Knight will see you now." Lily stood on unsteady legs. Her breath caught. This was it. No turning back. Inside, the office was all steel, glass, and power. Every detail whispered control, from the minimalist art to the floor-to-ceiling windows. And there, standing in that gleam of sunlight like it bowed to him, was Adrian Knight. He didn't look up right away. He stood at the window, his back straight, his hands in the pockets of a perfectly tailored suit. Dark hair, broad shoulders, presence that felt like gravity. When he turned, Lily's throat tightened. He was devastating. Not just handsome, controlled, intense. Eyes the color of a gathering storm. Sharp jaw. No smile. "Miss Hart," he said simply, as if reading the name from her bones. "Yes," she whispered. "Lily Hart." He offered a handshake. His palm engulfed hers, warm and firm. Just one shake, then release. "Please, sit." She obeyed, her knees brushing the soft leather of the chair. Across the desk, Adrian sat. Measured. Observant. "I assume," he began, "you're aware this is not a typical position." Lily nodded, her voice barely audible. The ad was vague. Deliberately, he steepled his fingers. "I require something highly specific, personal, intimate." A beat of silence. "I'm in need of an heir," he continued, as casually as if ordering lunch. "Several, ideally. And I have neither the time nor the inclination for courtship or marriage." Lily's breath caught. Was he saying he wanted to hire her to? "I seek a contractual partner," he said plainly. "To live at my estate, maintain discretion, and carry my children." Children. Plural. She blinked rapidly. "How?" She started, then faltered. "I mean, how would this work?" Adrian leaned back slightly. Naturally, the word hit like a spark to dry tinder. Lily's eyes widened. No labs, no doctors. He meant, with him. Heat bloomed in her chest, rising to her cheeks. I thought this might be surrogacy, not a relationship," he supplied, one brow arching. "It won't be one, at least not in the conventional sense. You'll be compensated generously. You'll want for nothing. Your medical care, your housing, your family's needs, all covered." She swallowed. "And how many triplets?" Her hand flew to her chest. "Triplets? If nature allows," Adrian said with an easy calm. "I have no expectation, but I'd prefer the children be close in age. A single birth of multiple children would be ideal. Naturally, we'll follow where biology leads." Lily sat frozen. His voice, low and even, made the whole thing sound clinical. And yet, something in his gaze, the way it lingered on her lips, the flicker in his eyes when she'd walked in, betrayed a different kind of interest. "You're young," he said quietly. "Healthy, unmarried. The medical profile was strong. No previous pregnancies?" She shook her head. "None." He paused. "You're a virgin, aren't you?" Lily's heart dropped into her stomach. She couldn't lie. Not now. "Yes." Something shifted in Adrian's gaze. He didn't smile, but attention left his shoulders. A strange, unreadable look crossed his face. Approval, perhaps. Maybe even relief. "That simplifies things," he said. Lily didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Why me?" she asked softly. "Surely someone more polished would have accepted." "Because they want me," Adrian replied. "They see my money, my name, you. You see something else, or nothing at all, which I prefer." Lily's voice wavered. "And if I say no?" He gave a half shrug. "Then we part ways. No harm done. You'll be escorted out with a generous thank you payment for your time." It was that simple. Or so he made it seem. But she wasn't here for curiosity. She was here for her father, for her family, for a future. Lily straightened. "And the contract?" Adrian opened a drawer and slid forward a thin folder. Inside was more money than Lily had ever seen spelled out on paper. Her hands trembled as she scanned the offer. "Half upon agreement, half upon confirmed pregnancy," he said. "And if I don't conceive, then you'll be released, but compensated for your time." Lily closed the folder. She looked up at him. I need to go home, she said. I need to get my things. Adrian nodded once. My driver is downstairs. As she rose to leave, he stood too. One last thing, he said. Should you agree? There will be no turning back. His voice was soft, but layered with something else. Not threat, not command. A promise, maybe. Lily nodded, her stomach in knots. I understand. But even as she left the office, escorted back through the gleaming halls, her mind was racing. Somewhere beneath the practicality of the offer, the paperwork, the clauses, the medical arrangements, something stirred, a feeling she hadn't expected. It wasn't fear, not quite. It was something far more dangerous. Hope. The car that collected Lily that evening didn't just take her to a new address, it transported her into another universe. The driver, impeccably dressed and silent, opened the door of the sleek black town car with a nod. Lily climbed in, her overnight bag clutched tightly in her lap, fingers digging into the worn canvas. They pulled away from her shabby apartment without fanfare. She didn't look back. She'd left behind more than an address. She'd left behind an old version of herself. The girl who waited tables, who budgeted rice and coupons, who cried herself to sleep wondering if her father would survive another month. Now she was headed towards something unfathomable. Adrian Knight's estate wasn't just a house. It was a world unto itself, carved into the hills above the city like a fortress of glass and stone. Massive gates parted as the car approached, revealing a winding drive lined with flickering lanterns and trimmed hedges so precise they'd look painted. The mansion loomed in the distance, lit from within like a beacon. Lily's breath caught. Every window glowed warm against the indigo dusk. It looked like something out of a fantasy, serene, intimidating, and utterly untouchable. Until now. When the car stopped, a manservant greeted her by name and opened her door. Miss Hart, welcome. Inside, the air smelled like lavender and lemon polish. The floors gleamed beneath her feet. Paintings lined the hallways, not mass-produced prints, but real art, with brushstrokes and texture. Chandeliers shimmered overhead. The ceilings soared. Adrian was waiting in the foyer. He wore no tie this time, just a fitted black shirt and tailored pants. Casual, but somehow still commanding. Lily, he said simply. No formal greetings, no small talk, just her name, but it landed heavy, like a declaration. Adrian, she replied, surprised by her own voice. He stepped forward. I trust the ride was smooth? Yes, thank you. Her grip on her bag tightened. She felt out of place, like a mismatched ornament in a curated museum. Adrian noticed. You look overwhelmed. I feel it, she admitted softly. His eyes held hers. You're safe here. Nothing will happen without your consent. No one will enter your space. You have your own wing. If you change your mind at any time, you have the right to walk away. But if you choose to stay, I expect honesty, claret why, respect. That's all I ask. Lily nodded, her throat tight. Adrian gestured to a nearby woman in crisp attire. This is Marianne. She manages the household. She'll show you to your suite. Marianne gave a polite smile. Right this way, Miss Hart. The walk through the estate was a maze of art, scent, and silence. Marble floors, velvet accents, fireplaces crackling quietly. Even the walls whispered wealth. Her room was not a room. It was a sanctuary. Soft creams and golds, a king-sized bed, a private sitting area. French doors opened onto a garden patio lit by fairy lights. Lily couldn't speak. She simply turned in a slow circle, absorbing the surreal beauty around her. If you need anything, Marianne said, just pick up the phone on your nightstand. There's a menu for meals, a schedule for housekeeping, and your closet has been pre-stocked in your sizes. She paused. And tomorrow morning, a physician will arrive for your first health evaluation. You are not expected to interact with Mr. Knight unless you choose to. Lily blinked. Oh, all right, thank you. Left alone, she sat on the edge of the bed and inhaled slowly. The sheets smelled of lavender. The silence pressed around her, but not unkindly. She should have felt like a prisoner. But instead, she felt weightless. For the first time in years, she wasn't scraping, begging, surviving. She was somewhere clean, quiet, safe. Dinner was served to her room. Salmon, roasted vegetables, lemon tart. She ate in her robe, barefoot, watching the stars through the patio doors. Every bite tasted surreal. And then came the knock. Not harsh, not hesitant. She opened the door. Adrian stood there. No suit, just slacks and a dark sweater. The man looked softer in this lighting, more human. "I realize this is sudden," he said, "but I thought I might check on you. May I come in?" Lily hesitated for only a second, then stepped aside. Yes. He walked in, hands in his pockets, gaze roaming the space. "I wanted to be sure you're settling in. I know this isn't a typical arrangement." "No," she said. "It's not." A beat passed. "I had a hard time eating," he said. "My appetite tends to falter when I'm anxious." "You're anxious?" she asked, surprised. Adrian turned to face her. "You're not the only one taking a leap, Lily." She looked away. "I keep asking myself if I'm crazy for saying yes." "You're not." His voice was low. "You're brave." She felt the heat of his gaze. Her heart pounded. There was a moment, still and charged, where neither of them moved. Then he stepped closer. "Lily," he said softly, "if you'd like to postpone the physical part of the arrangement, I'll respect that. This isn't about urgency. It's about readiness." "I understand," she whispered. "But I'm not afraid of you." Adrian's brows lifted slightly. "That's good to hear. I'm nervous," she added, "but I know why I'm here. And I trust you." That trust lit something behind his eyes, something raw. He moved a little closer, enough that the air changed between them. "Then I'll let you rest," he said, voice hoarse. "Tomorrow is a big day." But neither of them moved. Adrian's hand reached forward, just barely, and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "Good night, Lily." "Good night, Adrian." And then, like a man afraid to say too much, he turned and left. The door closed gently behind him. Lily stood alone, heart racing. She touched the spot on her cheek where his fingers had been. This man, this stranger, was building a space in her mind she hadn't expected. A man who'd spoken of her like a contract, but looked at her like a question he wanted to understand. Lily climbed into bed and turned off the light. Outside, the garden lights twinkled like fireflies. Inside, her world was changing forever. The next night fell over the estate like a velvet curtain. Lily stood at the tall mirror in her room, brushing her hair with slow, distracted strokes. Her thoughts raced, heart pulsing in her throat. The doctor had come and gone that morning, clean bill of health, green light for the process to begin. Adrian hadn't spoken a word about it since, but all day his presence haunted the halls. He passed her once in the corridor, his eyes catching hers, lingering for half a second longer than polite. During lunch, he sat across the table, silent but attentive, like a man observing a star he was afraid to touch. Now, with night pressing in, the air in her suite felt heavy. Anticipation curled through her like smoke. And then, the knock, not timid, not forceful, intentional. She opened the door. Adrian stood there. No jacket. Shirt unbuttoned at the collar. Sleeves rolled up. His hair slightly tousled, like he'd run a frustrated hand through it 100 times before arriving. "May I come in?" he asked. Lily stepped aside. "Yes." He entered slowly, pausing in the middle of the room, as though unsure how to begin. "I want to ask again," he said gently. "Are you certain about everything?" She nodded. "Yes, I am." Adrian exhaled, a breath of tension leaving his chest. He crossed the room, stopping just in front of her. "You're nervous," he murmured, lifting his hand to brush his fingers along her jaw. "I'm not afraid," she whispered. "Just new to all this." A flicker of warmth softened his expression. "You don't need to pretend for me. This isn't about fulfilling a contract tonight. This is about trust, and I take that seriously." She nodded, heart thudding in her ears. "Then show me." Adrian didn't speak. Instead, he leaned forward and kissed her, slow, reverent, the kind of kiss that asked permission at every turn. His hand cupped the side of her face thumb, grazing her cheek. Her lips parted beneath his, and a quiet sound escaped her throat, half relief, half longing. They stood that way for minutes, letting the kiss deepen, their breathing sink. When Adrian finally pulled back, his eyes were searching. "If you want me to stop, I won't," Lily cut in gently. "I want this." She felt his restraint tremble. He nodded once, then bent again to press a kiss to her temple, then her shoulder, then her collarbone. Piece by piece, Adrian undressed her, not with haste, but with reverence, as if he were unveiling something sacred. Her robe slipped to the floor, She stood in nothing but bare skin and soft candlelight. His breath caught audibly. "You're beautiful." Lily reached up, unbuttoning his shirt with unsteady fingers. Every button was a step toward vulnerability, toward trust, toward the unknown. Soon, his shirt joined her robe. His skin was warm beneath her palms, strong, yet trembling faintly with restraint. When her hand slid over his chest, he sucked in a breath. "You make me feel—" He started, then stopped. "Everything." His lips found hers again, hungrier now. Passion threaded through every kiss. Their bodies moved to the bed, a tangle of warmth and whispers. Lily lay back against the pillows, heart racing. Adrian hovered above her, gaze locked on hers. "I'll be gentle," he said. "I know," she whispered. He kissed down her neck, her chest, trailing warmth in his wake. When his fingers found the heat between her thighs, Lily gasped, her body reacting before her mind could catch up. Her first moan broke the silence, soft, unsure, and achingly honest. "You're so sensitive," he murmured, lips brushing her skin. "So responsive." Her hands fisted in the sheets as he touched her, slow and patient. Pleasure bloomed in gentle waves until her body writhed beneath him. When he finally moved between her legs, she met his gaze with raw trust. "I'm ready," she said, voice barely audible. Adrian guided himself to her entrance, holding her gaze. The first stretch made her gasp. Her hands flew to his arms, fingers digging in. He froze. "Breathe," he murmured. "I've got you." She nodded, swallowing a whimper. He kissed her through it, slow and soothing, until the sharpness eased and she opened for him. Then he moved. Every motion was careful, measured, loving. He made her feel seen, not used, not bought, but wanted. The contract had promised a child, but in this moment, all Lily felt was connection. Her body adjusted, adapted, and then to her surprise, welcomed him. The discomfort faded, replaced by something heady and electric. She arched into him, seeking more. Adrian groaned, the sound of a man unraveling. But even through his rising desire, he didn't lose focus. His touch never left her skin. His kisses never left her mouth. When she gasped again, this time it was different. Pleasure curled deep in her belly, a slow burn rising to a peak. Adrian felt it too. His thrusts grew deeper, more rhythmic. He whispered her name like a promise, like a prayer, and when release took her, sudden, consuming, she cried out, holding him like an anchor. He followed her seconds later, releasing into her with a groan torn from his chest. His body trembled above hers. For a moment, the world stilled. Then silence, heavy breathing, soft skin, two bodies tangled in afterglow. Adrian didn't pull away. He held her close, face buried in her neck, arms wrapped tight. "You okay?" he asked, voice hoarse. She nodded against his shoulder. More than okay. A soft chuckle escaped him. He kissed her again, slow and tired and full of something he didn't dare name. They lay that way for a long time, not speaking, just holding. Eventually, Adrian rose and pulled the covers over them. He gathered Lily against him, her head resting on his chest. "I never expected this," he said quietly. "Neither did I," she whispered back. But in the quiet of that night, Lily knew something had changed. It wasn't just a contract anymore. It was the beginning of something they didn't yet understand, but already couldn't live without. Weeks passed like petals falling from a hidden clock. Lily hadn't meant to fall into a rhythm with Adrian, but somewhere between their evening walks and shared breakfasts, something took root. He was still the man who had hired her, still precise, still powerful, still wrapped in suits and silences. But with her, he softened. He listened. He remembered the way she liked her, tea and the stories she told about her father's garden. He noticed when her laugh didn't reach her eyes, and when her smile stayed too long after a private thought. And in the quiet nights, he came to her, never demanding, always asking. They touched often now, not just for the contract, but because being apart felt incomplete. He would trail his fingertips along her back while she drifted off. She would kiss the edge of his jaw before he left her room at dawn. These small moments, once awkward, now felt natural, familiar, but never once did either of them say what they were thinking. Not out loud. Lily didn't dare ask what this was between them, because asking meant defining it. and defining it might destroy the illusion. She wasn't ready for that. She told herself to be grateful. After all, she'd accepted the deal knowing exactly what it was. And still, sometimes in the middle of the night, she caught him watching her as if he were memorizing her. That had to mean something, didn't it? One crisp afternoon, after a brief appointment with the private physician Adrian had assigned her, Lily walked through the east wing toward his office. She hadn't told him yet, but the doctor believed she might already be pregnant. The thought made her both ecstatic and terrified. She carried the news like a secret flame in her chest, unsure when or how to let it out. As she approached his office, she paused. His door was slightly ajar, and voices floated out. She recognized Adrian's, calm, controlled. The other belonged to Mr. Lang, the sharply dressed legal advisor she'd met once, in passing. "The terms are very clear," Lang was saying. "Once the children are born, she's entitled to the final installment and the property transfer you mentioned." "Yes," Adrian said. "I want her taken care of." "And afterward?" Lang asked. "What's the plan if she chooses to stay?" A long silence. Then Adrian's voice, quiet, almost unreadable. "She's free to go." That was always the agreement. And if she doesn't want to go? Adrian didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his words were even. "Then, I'll deal with it then." Lily felt something crack deep in her chest. She backed away quietly, shoes muffled by the thick carpet. Her hands were trembling. The walls of the estate suddenly felt colder, taller, not like a home, but a holding place. She ran, not out of the house, but back to her room, her sanctuary, her prison. Inside, she shut the door behind her and pressed her back to it. He meant to let her go. He hadn't said a single word about wanting her to stay. Not her, just the children. He hadn't said her name once in that conversation. Lily sat on the edge of the bed, wrapping her arms around herself. The world tilted. She thought of the way he held her, the way he kissed her wrist absent-mindedly during breakfast, the way his voice went soft whenever he said goodnight. It felt real, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just Adrian being a good host, a respectful partner, a man fulfilling a transaction with kindness. And she was falling in love, not just with the mansion, or the meals, or the relief from poverty. With him. And it shattered her. That night, she didn't come down for dinner. Adrian knocked once, but she pretended to be asleep. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, hands resting on her stomach. If the doctor was right, life was already growing inside her, but her heart felt hollow. She remembered the way Adrian's hands had cradled her face, the way he whispered her name when they made love. Had it all been just part of the arrangement? Was she just a means to an end? Lily turned her face into the pillow and cried silently. She didn't know how long she lay there, but eventually her breathing slowed, the tears dried, and a new resolve began to take shape. If all of this, the comfort, the warmth, the intimacy, was only temporary, then she had to prepare herself. She would protect her heart, for the sake of her unborn child, for her own dignity. No more illusions. She would fulfill the contract. And when the time came, when she delivered those children, she would walk away with her head held high, even if it broke her. By nightfall, Lily had made up her mind. She'd avoided Adrian all day, skipped lunch, canceled her usual walk in the garden, stayed tucked away behind the tall doors of her suite. Her body was still, but her mind never stopped. Every time she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman breaking quietly. She'd imagined telling Adrian about the pregnancy with joy. She'd pictured his arms wrapping around her, his voice warm with pride. But now, she couldn't risk it. Not when she knew he saw the end before it ever truly began. So she packed. She didn't have much. A few dresses, some shoes, the jewelry he'd bought her. She left those in the drawer. This wasn't about money. It never had been. The small suitcase sat half-filled on the bed when the door opened. She hadn't locked it. Maybe she wanted to be caught. Adrian stood in the doorway, eyes scanning the scene. Suitcase, tear-streaked cheeks, trembling hands. "Lily," he said, voice tight. "What are you doing?" She froze. Then she straightened her spine. "I'm leaving." Adrian stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. "Why?" She swallowed. "Because I can't stay here pretending anymore." He moved closer, confusion flickering across his face. "Pretending?" She nodded, chest rising and falling too quickly. "You've been kind, Adrian, gentle, but I heard you. I heard what you said to your lawyer. Realization dawned in his eyes. I was walking by your office, she continued, voice shaking. I wasn't eavesdropping. I heard you say that once the children are born, I can go, that the deal will be fulfilled, that I owe you nothing. Lily. No, she cut in. Let me finish. She turned to face him fully. I gave you everything, my body, my trust, my heart, and maybe I shouldn't have, maybe that was my mistake, but I believed in what we were building. Her voice cracked. I thought maybe I wasn't just a part of the contract, that maybe you saw me. But I was wrong. Adrian's jaw clenched. You weren't wrong. Then why did you sound so ready to let me go? She whispered, like it wouldn't matter either way. He took a step forward. Because I thought you would want to go. Her breath caught. I never wanted to trap you here, he said, voice low. I told myself this was a business deal because I was afraid if I asked for more, you'd leave. Lily blinked. What? I've been falling for you every single day, Lily, he confessed. From the first time you smiled at me over that ridiculous herbal tea, from the way you looked at my home like it wasn't impressive, just unfamiliar, from the night you told me you trusted me. She stood frozen, suitcase forgotten. I meant every touch, Adrian said. Every kiss. And when you stayed silent this morning, I thought maybe you were pulling away. So I braced myself. I told Lang to prepare the final terms. Not because I wanted you to leave, but because I couldn't bear the thought of forcing you to stay. Her eyes brimmed with tears. I thought I was just convenient to you, she whispered. Someone to give you the children you wanted. You were never just that, he said, stepping closer. Not for a single moment. Lily let out a shaky breath. Then why didn't you say anything? Because I was scared, he admitted. Scared of ruining the only real thing I've ever had. She stared at him, searching his face. So what do we do now? He stepped forward and gently took her hands. I want you to stay, he said, voice soft but firm. Not because of a contract, not because of the babies, but because I love you. Lily's lips parted. You love me? He nodded, eyes glistening. I love you, Lily Hart. I didn't expect it. I didn't plan it. But it happened, and it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I love you too, she whispered. I tried to hide it. I tried to protect myself. But I fell for you, Adrian. I fell hard. Relief crashed over his face. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, like he never wanted to let go. I'm pregnant, she whispered into his chest. The doctor thinks it might be twins, maybe even 3. Adrian froze. Then he pulled back to look at her. Are you serious? She nodded, a small smile breaking through. He laughed, breathless and disbelieving, then kissed her fiercely. You've given me everything, he whispered against her lips. Now let me give you everything in return. He lifted her effortlessly and carried her to the bed, laying her down with reverence. This time, they didn't make love out of obligation or fear or desire. This time, they moved with certainty, with emotion, with everything left unspoken now spoken aloud. They lost themselves in each other, slow, deep, real. Afterward, they lay together in the stillness, wrapped in each other's arms. No more confusion, no more hiding, just truth, just love. 6 months later, Lily lay on the padded table of the private clinic, fingers entwined with Adrian's. The ultrasound room was warm and quiet, humming softly with the sound of machines and anticipation. Adrian sat beside her, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbow. His grip on her hand was firm, steady, but the slight tremor in his thumb gave him away. They had been here before, for scans, checkups, blood work, but today was different. Today, the technician was looking for confirmation. 3 little heartbeats. The screen flickered to life as the wand glided gently across Lily's rounded stomach. Gel shimmered under the lights. And then, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Lily exhaled shakily, tears already gathering. There they are, the technician said with a soft smile. 3 strong, steady heartbeats. Your triplets are healthy, growing exactly as they should. Adrian let out a sound, something between a laugh and a gasp. He leaned forward, staring at the monitor like it was a miracle painted in light. Lily turned her head to look at him. His face said it all. Wonder, love, awe. You okay? She whispered. He didn't take his eyes off the screen. I've never been better. When the scan ended, Adrian helped her sit up, careful and attentive. His hand rested protectively on her lower back as they walked out together. In the hallway, he stopped. "Wait," he said. Lily turned, confused, and then he dropped to his knees. Before she could react, his hand slid over her belly, and he pressed his lips to the gentle swell. "Hey there," he whispered. "I know we haven't officially met yet, but your mom and I can't wait to see your faces." Her throat tightened. Adrian looked up at her, his expression soft, humbled. "They'll know love. From the first second, I swear it." Lily cupped his face. "They already do." They left the clinic hand in hand, the world outside bathed in golden spring light. 2 months earlier, they'd been married in a small, quiet ceremony at the estate. Just close friends, a garden in bloom, and vows that didn't come from lawyers, but from their hearts. Lily wore a simple ivory dress and carried nothing but a single lily stem. Adrian's eyes never left her once. And now, with their family growing faster than either of them could have imagined, everything that had once felt transactional had become deeply, beautifully personal. Back at the estate, the nursery was already underway. 3 cribs, hand-painted in soft colors. Storybooks filled a shelf by the window. A rocking chair stood in the corner, just waiting. That evening, Lily and Adrian sat on the terrace, wrapped in a blanket, a warm tea steaming between them. "Do you ever think about how it started?" she asked softly. Adrian gave a low laugh. "Every day. I was scared," she admitted. "So was I," he said, squeezing her hand. "I just wore better armor." She leaned against him. "It doesn't feel like a contract anymore." "It never was," Adrian replied. "Not really. It was a beginning." Lily smiled. The wind rustled through the vines above them, and the stars blinked to life overhead. "I used to think love had to look a certain way," she whispered. "But I was wrong." Adrian kissed her temple. "Love looks like this." 3 lives were growing inside her. Their family was forming, not through perfect planning, but through a leap of faith, a series of risks, and a tenderness neither of them expected. Lily no longer wondered if she'd been hired or chosen. She knew. She had been loved. And now she was home. The morning sun crept gently across the bedroom curtains as Lily stirred beneath the soft sheets. A light flutter danced low in her belly, not just from nerves but from movement. A tiny shift. A kick. She smiled without opening her eyes. Adrian was still asleep beside her, his arm draped protectively around her waist, his breath warm against her neck. He'd fallen asleep reading baby names aloud, his voice slowing, his fingers brushing her skin until the pages slipped from his hands and sleep pulled him under. She turned to face him now, studying the quiet strength etched into his sleeping face. He looked so different from the man who had once stood across a glass desk, talking about heirs and arrangements. That man had been guarded, steel-bound, strategic. This man, the one snoring softly into her hair, was unguarded, vulnerable, full of quiet affection and the kind of joy that could never be written into a contract. And it had taken everything, the fear, the risk, the broken moments, to reach this peace. She kissed his forehead softly and slipped out of bed, padding barefoot toward the balcony where the morning was unfolding. The sky was flushed with golden pinks. The gardens below were waking up, dew glistening on rose petals and hedges. The scent of spring curled upward like a blessing. Lily wrapped her arms around her belly and closed her eyes. 3 heartbeats. 3 lives inside her, and one outside, still learning how to love himself as deeply as he'd grown to love her. The journey hadn't been simple. Adrian hadn't become a husband overnight. He didn't always know how to talk about emotion, not in the way she did. But he tried. He listened. He took her hand in the dark when her doubts rose, and whispered reassurances that weren't rehearsed, but real. There were nights when she woke with dreams of her past, cold apartments, unpaid bills, her father's tired eyes, and Adrian would simply hold her, grounding her without words. She had learned to speak his language too. It was in the quiet cups of tea he left at her bedside before sunrise. It was in the way he read parenting books without her asking. It was in the softness of his voice when he spoke to her belly, telling the babies about code and constellations, about patience and strength. Love had grown between them, not as a sudden explosion, but like a vine climbing slowly up the wall of an old house, finding cracks, weaving through stone, taking root. Now Lily stood on the edge of something she'd once believed was impossible. Not just motherhood, but a life designed by love, not desperation. She remembered the woman she'd been when she first walked into that towering office. Worn shoes, a borrowed skirt, hands trembling around a cheap leather purse. That girl had come to trade herself for survival. She hadn't known she was worthy of more. But standing here now, barefaced and barefoot in a palace of her own choosing, Lily knew the truth. She had never just been part of a deal. She had always been someone worth choosing, not because she carried his children, but because she had the courage to be honest, vulnerable, and real. Behind her, the door creaked open. Adrian appeared, shirtless, eyes still heavy with sleep. "Why are you up?" he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. Lily smiled. "They kicked." He stepped forward instantly, kneeling and pressing his ear gently against her stomach. Hey, not without me," he whispered. "You better be practicing your coordination in there." She laughed, resting her hand on his head. "They're going to know your voice before they know light." He looked up at her, eyes shining. "I want them to know they're safe," he said softly. "That they were wanted, not just planned." Lily's throat tightened. "They'll know," she said, "because they'll see it every day." Adrian rose and pulled her close. The breeze wrapped around them like an invisible promise. "I never told you," he said, voice low. "But after that first night, when you fell asleep in my arms, I knew." "Knew what?" "That I'd never be able to let you go." She smiled into his chest. "Good, because I never wanted to go." They stood there as the morning grew brighter, wrapped in a silence made of trust. In the weeks ahead, there would be more planning. Baby showers, medical appointments, late-night cravings and early contractions, tears and laughter and fear. But they would walk through it all, not as two people bound by ink on paper, but as two souls who'd chosen each other against every odd. Because love, in its truest form, isn't made in grand speeches or perfect beginnings. It's built in the quiet moments, in honesty, in forgiveness, in the willingness to try again, even when you're scared, and in knowing that no matter how the story started, what matters most is how it ends, together. And so, from a contract to commitment, from fear to forever, Lily and Adrian found something neither of them expected, a love that wasn't just passionate, but purposeful. Their story reminds us that even in the most unconventional beginnings, love can bloom, quietly, steadily, and powerfully, when two hearts choose each other over and over again. Now it's your turn to share. Have you ever fallen for someone when you least expected it? Or found something beautiful in a situation that felt purely practical at first? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Your stories, your heartbreaks, your hope. Don't forget, like this video if you believe in second chances and slow burn love. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that love can come softly and change everything. Subscribe to Love and Twilights for more powerful stories that stir your heart and remind you that true love isn't perfect, it's real. Until next time, keep believing in the love that finds you when you least expect it and never lets you go.